Hear me?
I hear you in the background whenever I phone, telling your brother to say you're gone.
We're back. And it's been a little longer than I would have liked, but it's good to be able to sit down and share another story and a connection, another conversation that was had. If this is your first time stumbling across the channel, this is Giants Amongst Us, where we share in the unique human experience and where you're going to hear each and every time real stories told by real people just like yourself. Just to hip anybody who's coming across the channel for the first time, this is an extension of a podcast that's available. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Deezer, Audible, whichever streaming platform you like to plug into when you're listening to whatever it is you like to listen to. These are shorter, condensed versions of longer conversations that are had and found on the show or the website, giantsamongustus.com. And what we do is we celebrate the human spirit. We celebrate and highlight stories and experiences from people that come from all walks of life who have overcome struggle. So these are examples to anybody who's stuck in a rut, anybody who's in a dark spot, that things can change, things can get better. Let these stories remind you of the fact that you're not alone and change can be had. As a child, life was rough for D'Angelo. An abusive home, full of violence, drugs, and instability. At the tender age of 11, D'Angelo took to the streets trying to escape the abuse. He was hurting, afraid, and longing for acceptance and love. From juvenile halls throughout his adolescence to becoming a registered nurse as an adult, working in trauma units while still struggling with his own childhood trauma. D'Angelo eventually found himself in the belly of the beast, addicted to drugs, robbing banks, and then came an 11-year prison bid. What happened while D'Angelo was incarcerated? How did he handle the demons which were haunting him for so long? D'Angelo opens up and talks to us about some of these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is D'Angelo and his story.
I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, predominantly Italian neighborhood. My father, he left when I was young, so it was just kind of me and my sisters. Around the age of 11 or so, I ran away. Things at home weren't too good. I left and never went back. Moved to Arizona. I've lived kind of everywhere. Went to nursing school, Arizona State, became an RN, and then that's when the craziness happened. I didn't have the quote unquote normal childhood. There was a lot of chaos in my home. My parents were both drug addicts. As I got older, I started remembering things, so I would ask my sisters about it, and then come to find out they were, I became a drug addict when I was 4 or 5 because they were putting heroin in my bottle, meth. Just a lot of stuff. And I think that's when the switch got turned on and my addiction really started. But it wasn't until I got older and I got into drugs that I realized, maybe this started a lot earlier than now. I was into sports a lot. I played baseball, hockey. I played pretty much everything. But as I got older, when I became a nurse, that's kind of around the time where I was meeting. Actually, the first time I got high was with a doctor that I worked with. So my teenage years was spent kind of normal. But as I got older, that's when the drugs really started to come around and I had a lot of access to them. I've seen a lot of stuff, like you said, gunshots, accidents. But in saying that, I say this. When you see that kind of stuff, you find a way to cope with it. Like I said, some people get high. Some people, we don't make jokes about it, but we find a way to deal with it. So it wasn't unheard of to have somebody come in, with stab wounds or a husband murder his wife, and he's there and you got to take care of him. You got to kind of keep your feelings, it's tough. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
So what led to the change? You said you were there for 6 years. What happened? Did you end up resigning, call it quits, or life happened?
Life happened. One day I traded my stethoscope in for a syringe. I started doing the drugs, like you said, hanging around the wrong people. Issues with my childhood were starting to surface, and from a child, I adapted to the way of, hey, when things get bad, I can just run away from it. And when I found heroin or meth, that was my escape. Yeah, it was a little combination of everything. Before the drugs, I think my escape was work. There was a time where I didn't mind working 16 hours, or if another nurse called in, yeah, I'll pick up her shift because it was a distraction from what was going on eternally and emotionally, at that time. But when I got introduced to the drugs, I said, you know what, this is a lot better. So I'm done with nursing. I'm done with the medical field. I'm just going to get high. Like I said, when I stopped nursing and I got high, I talk a lot about this in my book, but I met a girl, and then the next day we got married. That's where I was in my life. I had a bunch of holes that I was trying to fill with nonsense. We got married the next day, and the next day we robbed our first bank. And it was her and I together was not a good mix at all. But we got into some stuff. We robbed Walmarts, massage parlors, 13 banks. We were out there just, getting high. That's what my life was. It was wake up, get high, go rob a bank, come home, get high again. And that's what I did for 2 months straight.
Were there other times where you felt like you were just on a suicide mission? You wouldn't even mind if it ended in that way?
Definitely, especially toward the end. For me, it was, I want to see how long I can stay in this bank. I want to lollygag around in this bank until the cops do come, and then we can hold court right here because I didn't care anymore. I didn't care if I died. I didn't care if somebody else got hurt. I really didn't care. And so that was my mindset was, if it goes down, it goes down. Where at first, I remember the first bank I robbed, I was extremely nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to do. So to rewind a little bit, when I went to federal prison, I was sent to, my first place I went was Florence, Colorado. I was in the max there. I didn't understand why I was in such high custody. I hadn't killed anybody. I mean, I was probably the only one there with a release date. The guys that were there, they weren't going home anywhere. They weren't, they didn't have anything to look forward to. So the environment there was tense. It was just, you could feel it in the air. So if somebody's going into that kind of environment and they're trying to work on themselves, it's extremely hard. It's kind of hard to reflect on your past and deal with your emotions when you're worried about not getting stabbed. My whole time there, I never seen one fight. It was all stabbings. And it happened often. I was on a yard where they stabbed the warden in the kitchen because the food was cold. How do you work on yourself in that kind of environment? It's very hard. It wasn't until, when I first went in, I adapted quick because I still had that mentality of I don't care. So I was picking up violations. I served a lot more time than I should have because I had lost all my good time because I was acting stupid in prison, fights, doing this, doing that. But it wasn't until I was shipped to a lower security where I finally was able to have access to counselors, a drug program, so I could figure out why I was getting high. It was tough. It was lonely. It was a lonely experience, but I've always been on my own. I've always been comfortable by myself, maybe not with myself, but I didn't have to be surrounded by people to be okay. But I had a doctor there, a psychiatrist that I would talk to, and she really got me thinking when she would give me these exercises to do, if I'm feeling some kind of way, write them down and then we'll talk about it. And the whole process of me, I think it began with learning how to forgive, really, not only the people, not, my family, the stuff I went through as a kid, but myself. I learned, my self-talk became, hey, that wasn't your fault. You were a kid. you went through it, but that's not who you are. Yeah, you robbed banks and you did this, but that's not who you are. It's what you did. So I had to learn who D'Angelo really was, because I never knew who I was. I really didn't. I went in the direction that the wind was blowing all my life. So when I did come to terms with who I am and who I want to be, things became a lot easier, because now I had a goal. I had an end game, a way of life that I really wanted to pursue that was positive, and that's what I do. I love helping people, but that wasn't who I was when I went to prison. Definitely not. That's who I've always wanted to be. I just didn't know how to get there. So learning how to forgive, express how I'm feeling, whether through talk or writing, has really, really helped. And so for people out there that's going through some stuff, just know that things will get better. Things don't have to be the way they are, but in order for that to happen, the first step has to be with you. You have to make that first step. Nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody cares. There's the movie The Bronx Tale, and there's a scene in there where the dad or the guy tells the kid, nobody cares, and they don't. This world is cruel, it's tough, but if you want to change and you want to make it, it starts with you.
Appreciate you all sticking around. If you enjoyed the conversation, if you enjoyed some of what you heard, you can always share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear this conversation in its entirety, unfiltered, go to the show notes. You'll find a link that'll send you to where you can hear it unabridged. And you can listen to D'Angelo share some of his story, his experience, and how he's turned over a new leaf and started a new chapter in his life. You guys can find more past stories and past Giants Amongst Us at giantsamongstus.com. And if you guys appreciate the channel, if you appreciate the stories and some of the experiences that are shared on this channel, share your thoughts. Or whichever streaming platform you listen to the full conversation, go ahead and give it a rating free of charge. Any input would be appreciated so we can continue to help build and establish something worth value. So you guys stay safe, you guys stay sane. We're going to catch up and do this again real soon. But before I leave, if you would like to be a part of the show and share your story, or maybe even a story of someone in your life that has impacted you in a positive way, you can always reach out to me via email. I'd be happy to connect. Until next time, and very soon. Peace.
Looking for a sign to know I'm on the right road. Ain't seen no sign since Jericho.